Yeah. So in the previous session, we started with business objects, data services. We started with BODS. So I'll just try to give you 5 to 10 minutes recap of BODS, and then we can start our regular session on the BODS. So in previous session, we were looking at what is BODS. BODS stands for Business Objects, Data Services. BODS is an ETL tool. We can extract, transform, and finally load data to SAP HANA. In BODS, there are two main components. One is known as job server. The second one is a repository. A repository is a collection of metadata. A job server is used to transfer content from source systems to target systems. Whenever we import tables from source system like ECC to BODS repository, each table has columns, each column has data type and length. All this information about a table is stored in a repository. These repositories are known as local repositories, or they are also known as local object libraries. For example, in our project, if there are 10 developers who are developing for BODS, each of each of the user will have their own repository. Each user will have its own repository. This repository is nothing but local object library. So repositories is to store metadata, and job server used to transfer content either from SAP system or non-SAP system to SAP HANA. That's what we have seen in the previous session. In today's session, I'm going to show how we can do this from end to end. Means creating of database, creating a repository, creating a job server, assigning the job server to the repository, registering the repository at the central management console, and finally creating a data flow. The HANA consultants creates a data flow to transfer data from source system to target system. So we'll start from the step-by-step process on how we can configure and later how to create these data flows. Now, what is the importance for us to learn the configuration? Sometimes we will be asked to create our own local repositories. Sometimes admin can create, sometimes we have to create. So most of the time when you're working on the on-site, they'll ask you to create your own local repository. If you're offshore, there is an administrator who creates local repositories and assigns to us. But when working on on-site, we have to create. So this exercise would help you to create your own local repositories. So first I'm going to let us open Paint. Let's open Paint. So here we have BODS, Business Objects. BODS. In BODS we have job server, and the second one is a repository. So on the source we have ECC, and target we have HANA. So let us start from the first step. In step number 1, first we need to have a database. Either we can use HANA as our database for repository, or we can use MS SQL as a database for our repository. So in order to create these repositories, we have an option called repository manager. So in the repository manager, we can create a repository, job server. Job servers can be created at server manager. So repository manager to create repositories, to manage the repositories, and job server where we create a server manager to maintain the job server. To create a repository, first we require a database, because this repository information, the repository information is stored in tables. These are nothing but metadata tables. These tables store the metadata. So in order to store these tables, we require a database. This database I'm going to create in MS SQL. So first I'm going to log into MS SQL. At the MS SQL, what is the user interface? Management Studio. Like for HANA, we have HANA Studio. For MS SQL, we have Management Studio. So let us click Start. Let's click All Program. Let's click SAP HANA and click SAP HANA Studio. And click OK. So once we click OK, so here we have System. So this is HANA Studio where you can create repositories at the catalog, or click Start, click All Program, click Microsoft SQL Server 2012 R2, and click on SQL Server Management Studio. So this is HANA Studio. This is for HANA. And then here you have Management Studio. Management Studio is for MS SQL. The login is best. Password is W capital welcome 123. So HANA Studio for HANA and Management Studio for MS SQL. So once we give the user ID and password, so this is the database. So in here, once you expand you have different databases over here. These are just like schema, collection of database objects. In HANA, we call it a schema. In here we call it as database. Right click on database, click new database. I'll give the name BODS repo 50. So this is the database I'm creating. I'm creating this database. So why are we creating this database? To create our repository. So what is the step number one? Step number one is to create a database. Where am I creating? I'm creating this in the Management Studio. So Management Studio is used to administer and maintain MS SQL database. So I'll go back. I'm creating a new database. So this is the name of the database and click OK. So once we click OK, so here we have a new database created, which is BODS repo 50. Now, I would like to secure this database. In order to secure this database, I create a security for this database. In order to create a security, we need to have a user ID and password. We need to have user ID and password. So I'm going to create a user and password for this. I'll go back, expand security. We have logins, expand logins. So these are different logins we have in the system for now. I'll right click on login, new login. I'm creating a new login. I'll give it as BODS user 1. I'm going to use the authentication, SQL Server authentication. I won't enforce any password policies like you need to have W capital letter or you need to have a special character. I'm just going to enter a password here. So who is doing all these activities? In real world, all these activities are done by the BODS administrator. He actually configures everything for us. And finally, what he gives is a user ID and password to log into the workbench. So all these things I'm doing, for us it is good to know. So finally we will be logging to the data services workbench to perform our activities. But before that I require a repository. So to create a repository, these are the following steps. First is to create a database. The second step is to create a user ID and password. The user ID is this, and I'm going to give a password W capital welcome 123. W capital welcome 123. I'll click on server roles. So I'll give in all the roles that are giving the administrative roles. User mapping. I have to map a user to database. So what is our database? Our database is BODS repo 50. I click on this. The user is BODS user 1 in BODS repo 50. I'll give the database role membership. I'm going to give all the administrative privileges and click OK. So now a database is created in MS SQL Server, and then here we have one user created. So now I have a user. The username is BODS user 1. Sorry, it's 50. BODS user 50. BODS user 50 is the name of the user. This user is in this repository. I mean this database. I'm assigning this user to this database. Now this is on the database side. Step number 2. In the step number 2, we need to create a repository. Step number 1, to create a database, to create a user. Step number 2, to create a repository. So where do we create repositories? At the management studio. Sorry, at the repository manager. To log into the repository manager, click Start, click All Program, click Data Services 4.2 and click Data Services Repository Manager. So click on this Repository Manager, and here we have what is the repository type? Local. Local repositories are also known as local object libraries. So how many types of repositories? We have 3. Local, central, profiler. Local, central, profiler. What is the difference between a local repository and a central repository? The difference is, now when we have, let's say, 3 developers working, we have developer 1, developer 2 and developer 3. Each developer will have his own repository. One local repository he'll be assigned, where he can work on his own local repository. Now in a case where a developer 1 want to share his objects to a developer 2, so we create a repository called central repository. Once we create this repository, we will assign the local repository to central and this developer local repository to central, and we can share objects between both these developers. So in a multi-user environment, whenever you want to share objects, we can create a central repository, assign our local repositories to central to exchange ETL flows from one developer to a different developer. So a local repository, central, and finally profiler. Profiler is used to check quality of data. What is the quality? Are we getting any special characteristics? Are we getting any tailoring spaces, single quotes, double quotes? What is the quality of data we're getting? We can analyze using a profiler. So now we are creating a local repository. First we need to have, for each developer we need to have one local repository. So what is the database type I want to create for local? I want to use Microsoft SQL Server. I can also use HANA. I can also use Microsoft SQL Server to create my repository. Database server name. So what is the server name of the database? What is the server name? Let us see. The server name of the database is GNS. So GNS is the server name. So this is case sensitive. A database name. Database name is BODS repo. BODS repo 50. BODS repo 50. Username BODS user. So all these are case sensitive. We need to be a little careful here. So at what case I'm creating this, we need to specify the same case and then finally give the password and click create. Once you click create, so it says there is an error occurred during the creation of local repository. So let me once again see the case at which I created. This is caps and this is caps. The user ID BODS user 1. So it's the user 1. I've given 50 over here. Database name is BODS repo 50 and the username is BODS user 1. Welcome 123 and click create. So once we click create, now it's creating a repository. So it's basically creating a repository now. It's creating a repository. So once it creates a repository, now it will start creating system tables. So usually this database does not have any tables by default. It will start creating all the system tables. And finally we will get a message saying that the local repository was successfully created. Now once the local repository is successfully created, once this is created, so we right click on database, right click and refresh. And here we expand the database, which is BODS repo 50, expand this database, expand tables inside this database. So all these tables are created now. So all these tables are now created by BODS repository. So these tables will store all the information regarding the work that we do in the workbench and the metadata that we import at the workbench. Now the same thing can be done for HANA also. So I'll show you how to do it for HANA also. I'll click Start, click All Program, click SAP HANA, click SAP Data Services 4.2, click on Data Services Repository Manager. So for HANA, repository type local, database type SAP HANA, database version HANA 1.x, database server name SAP HANA, port number 30015, username best, password W capital, welcome 123 and click create. So it says already a repository exists, name SAP HANA already. You want to continue, the repository will be overwritten. Do you want to replace the existing repository? So because already someone has created, so I'll click yes. So again it's recreating the repository. So once it creates, now if you go to the HANA Studio, if I expand the schema called best, and here when I expand these tables, now you see all these tables are created by BODS as row oriented tables, because all these are system tables. So until here, All these tables are created by BODS. And similar kind of tables you'll also have at the you see ADDR info CODE data. This is on the management studio, and here ADDR CODE data. This is the HANA studio. Similar tables are created. We can maintain the repository at HANA studio or maintain the repository at the MS SQL server. Now once this repository is done, either at MS SQL or in HANA, we created a local repository. The next step number 3. Step number 1, to create a database. Step number 2, to create a local repository at the repository manager. Step number 3, to create a job server. So to create a job server, we created a server manager. So click Start, click All Program, and then click Database SAP HANA, SAP Data Services 4.2, and click Data Services Server Manager. Once we click on Data Services Server Manager, we can create the job server. So we can create the job server here. So click on Configuration Editor. So please see, I'm not eligible to create because my authorization is restricted to create the job server. Now why authorization is restricted? The reason is, when the job server runs on the background, it's going to consume system resources. Now we see for now, so we already have, you see, the CPU usage is almost 76% or 80%, and the memory utilization is 28 GB. So if each one of us will start creating these job servers, it may hinder the system performance. So that is the reason we limited. If every participant creates, then there will be a few hundreds of job servers which will be running in the background, but most of will not be used, only for one-time creation. So hence there is the job server restricted, not to be created over here, to utilize the system resources in the best manner. We can use the existing job server, which is the job server _1, or we can create a new one. But in order to create a new one, we require administrative privileges in order to do this. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to delete this after creating. So I'm logging into the administrative account. So I'll go into administrative account, log into the administrative account, and click OK. Log into the administrative account. So in here, again I'm going to start, click All Program. Let's click Data Services 4.2, and let's click Data Services Server Manager, and then click Configuration Editor. So here we can see Add, but there it is only View. So I can add a new job server, click Add. So what am I trying to do here? we are creating a new job server and assigning this job server to the repository. So I'll give a name. So I'll give a name over here. Job server 1. Job server port number. So we can create job servers 3500 till 9999. So you can use the port number 3500 till 9999. I'm going to give it as 3599 and click on add. So at this step, we are creating a job server. We are assigning the job server to the repository. So the database type is Microsoft SQL Server. A database server name. The server name of the database is BODS. Oh, it's GNS. GNS database name BODS repo 50. Username BODS user 1 and the password W capital welcome 123. So this is the repository information which we already created, and now I'm assigning this job server to the repository. So I'll give it as 2. We already have 1, I think. I'll give it as 2. Click apply. Click apply. So this is the associated repositories, and click OK. So here we have job server 2, port number 3599. Click OK. And then let us close and restart services. Let's click close. This will restart data services on this machine. Click OK. So now it is restarting data services on this machine. So once it is refreshed, then I'll go back to the diagram over here. So what would we do in this step? We have created a job server in step number 3, and we assign this job server to the repository. Now why? When you have a table, the table is imported to repository. The same table content is transferred via job server. So we need to hold together the container as well as the content. So we associate the job server to transfer the content for this container which is stored in the repository. So that's what we have done in the step number 3. We associated job server to the repository. So let me recap again. Step number 1, at the MS SQL Server Management Studio, we created a database. We secured the database by creating a user ID and password. Step number 2, to create a local repository. To create a local repository, we use a repository manager. Step number 3. Step number 3, to create job server. We create job server and server manager. We associate the job server to the repository. So that's until step number 3. Now, we have BOBA platform. Business Objects Business Intelligence Platform. Now to this platform, we need to give information about our repository. Whatever the repository we created, we need to inform to this platform that I created this repository, so please register my repository. In order to register the repository, I have a UI. The user interface is Central Management Console, CMC. In order to register my repository at the CMC, I'll open the CMC. So in order to open the CMC, which is Central Management Console, I have shortcuts folder on my desktop. I'll double click on the shortcuts folder. In here you can see one of the option, SAP Business Objects BI platform, BOBI platform, Central Management Console. I'm going to double click on this. I'll double click on this. I'm going to give my username as best. The password is wcapitalwelcome123 and click log on. So once we log on, in order to register the repository at the CMC, at the Central Management Console, we click on Data Services. We click on Data Services. Now in here at the Data Services, I click on this Configure a new Data Services repository. I click on this. I register the repository at the CMC. So I'll give the name as BODS repo 50. I'll give the name and the description. What is the database type we are using? We are using Microsoft SQL Server. We use the database server name is GNS. The port number 1433. Database name BODS user 50. Username BODS user BODS user 1 and the password welcome 123. So what are we trying to do in step number 4? In step number 4, we are registering the repository that we created at the BOBI platform at the CMC Central Management Console. So once I give in all these details, I'll click Test Connection to test whether this is the right information we are providing. Once we click on test, it says there's a problem to connect to the repository. Login failed. So I think BODS user 1, BODS, sorry, it's repo. BODS repo 50. I've given the database name wrong. I'll give the password again. Welcome 123 and click test connection. So successfully connected to repository. So I'm able to connect to the repository. Click OK. Click OK. And finally click save. Once I click save, it says configuration name already exists. Because I tried to click twice, on the save button. So once it is saved, again I try to click save. That's why this message comes. I'll cancel this. So here you see, let us refresh. So here we see BODS repo 50, which is just created now. So once this repository is created, which is a registered BODS repo 50, I registered this at the CMC. Step number 4. In step number 5, for this repository that I registered, and to log on to BODS system, we require a user and we require a password. In order to log into the BODS system, I require a user ID and I require a password. So I'll start creating my user ID and password so that I can give to developers. They can log in and they can start to create ETL flows. So to create this user ID and password, I'll go back. I'll click on this. I'll select user management, users and groups. I'll click on users and groups. I'll click on this user. I can create a new user. I'll give this username as, so this is the username for Workbench. So let's say I create a new user called, for example, Surya. I give the Surya password welcome 123, welcome 123. So password never expires, password cannot be changed. So I'm creating a new user for a developer called Surya. I can click create. The account must contains one. So I have to give the account name, Surya. I'll click create. So Surya is created. So once the Surya is created, I'll click on user list. Once I click on user list, I can see the user called Surya. I'll double click on this user. I will assign security for the user, or assign the security, what Surya can do in the system. Now I'm assigning administrative privileges to Surya. I'll click join group. I'll select administrators. I'll make Surya as a part of the administrators group and I'll click OK. This is a part of the administrative group and click close. So once I click close, now Surya is created. We have given a password. We have given privileges to Surya. Now finally Surya is created. Now this user called Surya, now he will start to log into the BODS system for the first time. So he is the developer, Surya, and for Surya the repository is BODS repository. BODS repo 50 is the name of the repository I registered at the CMC. So Surya will do all his development in this repository. And Surya, this repository, the job server, is the job server 2. Is the job server. Job server 2 is the name of the job server. So two important components, job server and repository. The name of the repository BODS repo 50, and the name of the job server 2. The user is Surya. The password is welcome123. I'm going to click on Start, All Program, click Data Services 4.2, and I'm going to start with Data Services Workbench. Once I click on the workbench, the username is best. I'm going to provide the password. Sorry, the username is Surya because I created a new user. So this is the default user. I'm going to remove this. I'll enter the new user called Surya. Password welcome 123 and click log on. So once we click log on, the username Surya and the password. Now for the first time when a developer logs in, we would see the welcome page called Data Services Workbench. For the first time, this is the page that you can see. You can close this and then you can see some of the work that we have already done in the past. So in a similar manner, we also have one more UI for data services, that is the designer. I'll click Start, click All Program, click Data Services 4.2 and click Data Services Designer. So once I click on the designer, so at the designer I'm going to use the username called Surya, password W capital welcome 123 and click log on. So what's my repository? My repository is BODS repo 50. I'll double click on this and give the password. So what's the password? It's the password of the repository. Welcome, W capital welcome 123 and click OK. Now for the first time we're logging into the designer. So at this point of time, the administrator gives or sends an email to a developer. This is your user ID, this is the password, and this is the repository you need to use to start your development work. From here onwards, the developer will start creating ETL flows. So in the next session, we will see how we can create ETL flows to use different transformations. So until now, the part most of the time is done by the administrator. Unless and until we hold a senior position in the company, senior consultant or the solution architect, we usually don't do these things and we don't have privileges to do these things. And also a little senior position can do, and a developer who is already experienced can do. But if you're coming as a HANA developer, we won't be able to in a position to do these activities. So this will be already created for us. And they're going to send an email saying that this is username, password, use this repository to start your development work on the ETL process. So just to recap again, so this is the total 5-step process. Step number 1, create a database, assign the security, create a repository at the repository manager, create a job server at the server manager, assign the repository to the job server, register the repository at the CMC, create a user ID and password, log in with the user ID and password to start to create ETL flows. Thank you everyone to attend today's session. We'll take up the questions now. I'll see the questions in the chat box and read out the questions. Thank you. So I'll read out the questions that we have here. What is the difference between the designer and the workbench? So designer is the old UI and the workbench is the new UI. So most of the time for HANA we work in the workbench area. I see the transforms in BODS workbench. In what scenarios we need to use the workbench? When you want to transform data, you can apply different business rules and transform, like you can do data cleansing activity, you can merge, you can apply conditions, you can filter, you can denormalize tables. All these things can be done in the workbench. So is data provisioning entirely a different migration process? So, so what will be mainly done by us? I think it is, I know it's a little confusing, but the point we have to focus over here is only on the uh, tomorrow session. In the tomorrow session, we start creating ETL flows. So whatever we have done today is only for good to know. It is not mandatory that we have to do everything. It's only to know from end to end what is the repository, how the repositories are created, where the metadata will get stored, what is the job server, how to create a job server, how we are associating the job server to repository, registering to BOBA platform. This is just to get you to entire picture. Now I can directly show you the user ID and repository, but this is the backend work that is usually done, and this is through coordination. Database creation will be in separate role, the admin will be a different role, but we as an application consultant is directly start to create from the ETL flows that we will see from tomorrow's session. This is only to discuss the end-to-end scenario. If you want, you can learn. If you want, we can practice on this. But this is not mandatory. But tomorrow's session is what is very really important, and this is all good to know for us. So the other question: why did we create two users? One is BODS one user one and Surya. What's the difference between them? BODS user one is the user for the database. Database has a separate user, but BODS is an application. So application has a different user. So Surya is a user at the application, and BODS one user one is a user at the database. I think for some of you, the Dropbox is full. I'm not sure for what participants the Dropbox is full. Please, Dropbox cannot accumulate more than 2 GB. If that is the case, uh, please do create a new Dropbox, and we will reassign you the new videos to your new Dropbox. Sometimes the Dropbox is full; it can only accumulate uh, 2 GB of data. It cannot take more than that. That is the default space given to any new Dropbox user, unless and until we purchase. We have to purchase, or we have to reference friends to get zero point 0.5 MB of data for each uh, invitation that we send. So if that is not the case, I recommend you to create another Dropbox. I'm going to reassign the new videos to the new Dropbox. Thank you. what is the difference in using SQL database and HANA database? When you use HANA database, now you see, when working on the real world, only to create a repository, probably we would not be purchasing SQL server because we already have HANA database. We invested on the database, so we even start creating the repository on the new HANA database. Because only for creating a repository we won't have SQL. So the difference is nothing but the cost that it's involved. So we have an option to create in both these areas. You can create in HANA as well as on the MS SQL. You can use both. So if you have MS SQL, you can create an MS SQL for non-SAP systems. If you have HANA, we can create in HANA. So we have both the options, either to create in HANA or in the MS SQL. So tomorrow we will see. So tomorrow we will see from the developer point of view how to create ETL flows. Today was only to know the entire flow, how these things are created in the back end. But we actually start from directly from the workbench. Tomorrow means, I mean to say on Monday. The next session is on Monday. I'm sorry, I mean tomorrow means on Monday. That is in the next session. Thank you everyone to attend today's session, and have a nice weekend. Good morning and good night to everyone. Thank you.